All right, so strap yourselves in for today's deep dive. We're going deep into human-made horrors, and I gotta tell you, this one's got me looking over my shoulder already.
And you should be, because we're not talking about the supernatural here. Oh no. This is about the chills you get from knowing that the real monsters out there, well, they're human.
Exactly. We're talking about those what would you do moments, like think stalker encounters or home invasions. You know, the situations where one wrong move could, well, it could be the last one you make.
Absolutely. And what's even creepier is we're basing this whole deep dive on actual survivor stories, and witness accounts. Like we're talking about real people who have faced down these horrors and lived to tell the tale.
Yeah, it's like those horror movies we all love, right? But this is the real deal, and it makes you realize that those fictional scenarios, even though they're amped up for for the screen, they tap into something very real. You know, those primal fears that we all have.
Right. Like, look, one story that really got to me, it was about this roadside encounter. It's like straight out of Jeepers Creepers
Oh
almost.
yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, so you've got this witness, right? And they describe seeing this shady figure, like they're trying to get rid of something down this big, drainage pipe.
Ugh, makes my skin crawl just thinking about it. It's like, what is it about those situations? It's like your common sense is screaming, "Run!" but there's this part of you that just has to look.
Well, that's the thing about morbid curiosity, right? It can really mess with your head,
Yeah.
and it's not just a horror movie thing either. Think about it. People rubbernecking at accidents, true crime podcasts. I mean, we are drawn to the dark side, aren't we?
Yeah, it's almost like our brains are wired for it. Like we have to try and make sense of the scary stuff, even when it's even when it's dangerous.
There's definitely a psychological component at play there. I mean, humans, we're curious by nature. We want to understand the world around us, but sometimes that curiosity, it can override our sense of self-preservation,
Mm.
especially when we're confronted with something that's both fascinating and terrifying at the same time.
It's like that saying, curiosity killed the cat,
Yeah.
but sometimes it feels like it could kill us too.
It definitely could. And speaking of overlooking those crucial details, we have another story that really hits home. It's about a subway stalker. It's got that drag me to hell vibe where
Mhm.
like little things get missed, those red flags.
Right.
Like in this case, this person, the victim, they kind of blew off like a series of weird things,
Yeah.
just little things like someone staring a bit too long or bumping into the same person a couple of times like on the platform.
Yeah. It's so easy to dismiss those things, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
you're just trying to get through your day, and you don't want to think, "Oh, is this person following me?" It's easier to just tell yourself you're being paranoid.
Totally, totally. And hindsight, it's always 2020, isn't it? But in the moment, it's tough. You're trying to convince yourself that everything's fine, because the alternative is just too scary.
It's like we're wired to downplay those potential threats,
Yeah.
almost like a defense mechanism.
Exactly, exactly. It's a way of protecting ourselves, from that anxiety. But as these stories show us, that denial it can have some pretty serious consequences.
So the takeaway here is not just to be, being careful about being curious, but also to be hyper aware of your surroundings and not dismiss those gut feelings, even if they seem silly.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And that brings us to another crucial point. When it comes to danger, our brains can sometimes be our own worst enemy.
Oh, I've definitely been there.
And that's what we're calling trapped by logic, or sometimes the lack thereof. We've got these stories that are just like head scratchers. You wonder how seemingly smart people make such, let's just say questionable choices.
Right. Right. It's like one story that comes to mind is this home invasion, right? And instead of like finding a safe place to hide, the victim just like froze, and they ended up like confronting the intruder head on.
It's almost like their brain just short circuited.
Right. Exactly. And it makes you realize how powerful fear can be. It can totally override our rational thinking.
Oh, absolutely. It's like, you've heard of fight or flight. Well, sometimes it's fight, flight, or freeze, and that
Oh,
freeze response, well, it's not always the best strategy.
not always, no.
And it's not just about home invasions either. Think about, like, getting lost in the wilderness. We have this story about this hiker, and they had a map, they had a compass, but they panicked and just, like, wandered off.
Oh, I hate when that happens in movies.
Right. And it happens in real life, too. And it just goes to show how even when we have the tools to make good decisions, fear can just completely cloud our judgment.
Like we get tunnel vision or something. We can't see anything but the threat right in front of us.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to not only have a plan, like for emergencies and stuff, but also to practice those plans, so that when the pressure's on, your brain doesn't just go poof.
Yeah, it's like a fire drill, but for your brain, right?
Exactly. The more we can anticipate those fight or flight responses, and practice how we're going to deal with them, the better off we'll be when it really hits the fan.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a little more prepared just thinking about it, but I'm also getting a little freaked out, I got to be honest.
Yeah. Well, buckle up because this next theme, it might be the most unsettling of all. We're talking about the dangers of, well, basically the dangers of going along with the crowd.
Oh, I'm sensing a story coming on.
Oh, you know it. We're diving into the dangers of groupthink and blind obedience. And trust me, this is one deep dive you won't want to miss. It's like, you're in a group, right? And you want to fit in. You don't want to be the odd one out. So you go along with what everyone else is saying, even if deep down you're thinking, this isn't a good idea.
Oh, I totally get that. Like peer pressure, it's not just a high school thing, right? It can happen to anyone at any age.
Absolutely. We're social creatures, We
Yeah.
we crave that acceptance. So it makes sense that we'd be influenced by the people around us, even if it means ignoring our own better judgment.
Yeah, it's like our need to belong can sometimes trump our need to be safe, which, I mean, that's kind of messed up when you think about it.
It is. And that's why it's so important to be aware of that, that tendency to just follow the crowd and to really work on developing those critical thinking skills.
So it's about learning to trust our own gut, even when everyone else is telling us to do something different.
Exactly. It's about having the courage to say, hey, wait a minute, something doesn't feel right here. Even if it means rocking the boat a little bit.
Okay, easier said than done, I think, especially when you're in a high pressure situation.
Oh, for sure. And that's where the blind obedience to authority comes in. We tend to defer to people we see as experts, right? Especially when we're feeling stressed or unsure of what to do.
Right. Like if a firefighter tells you to do something, you're probably going to do it, no questions asked.
Exactly. But sometimes, even those authority figures, they can make mistakes. Or the situation can change, and those initial instructions, well, they might not be the best course of action anymore.
Oh man, that's scary to think about. So what do we do? How do we know when to trust authority and when to trust our own gut?
Well, it's a tough one, but I think the key is to always be assessing the situation, to be asking yourself, does this make sense? Does this feel right?
So it's not about disrespecting authority, but it's about being aware that they're not always right.
Right. It's about understanding that blind obedience, even to someone in a uniform, can sometimes be more dangerous than helpful.
Okay, that's a lot to take in, but I think I'm getting it. It's about being aware of all these different factors, the groupthink, the authority figures, and then also trusting our own instincts.
Exactly. And that brings us to our last theme for today, which is, well, it's kind of a chilling one. We're calling it underestimating the adversary.
Okay, I'm already getting chills.
Yeah, well, this one's particularly relevant when we're talking about stalkers or abusers, people who prey on others, people who are willing to take advantage of vulnerability.
Okay, that's some dark stuff.
It is. And one of the things we see over and over again in these stories is this tendency to underestimate the threat, to downplay the danger, especially when it's coming from someone we know or someone we used to trust.
Like an ex-partner or something.
Exactly. And it's understandable, right? You don't want to believe that someone you cared about could be capable of hurting you. So you make excuses, you rationalize their behavior, you tell yourself it's not that bad.
But sometimes it is that bad, isn't it?
Yeah. And unfortunately, by the time people realize just how dangerous the situation is, it can be too late.
So what can we do to avoid falling into that trap,
Yeah.
Of underestimating the threat?
Well, I think the first step is awareness, right? We need to be aware that this is a real danger and that it can happen to anyone.
Right. It's not just something that happens in movies. It's a real life horror that people face every day.
Absolutely. And the next step is to be willing to take those threats seriously, even if they're coming from someone we know, even if it's uncomfortable or inconvenient.
So it's about setting boundaries and seeking help when we need it, even if it means going against what society might tell us to do.
Exactly. It's about putting our safety first, always, and that's a message I think we can all take to heart.
So we've really gone deep into like the dark side of human nature here. It's a lot to process. I mean, how do we move forward after hearing all these stories? I mean, do we just like barricade ourselves in our homes and never go outside again?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's understandable to feel, a little shaken up after hearing all this, but the key is to channel that fear, to use it as fuel to become more, well, more aware, more prepared.
Okay, so you're saying like don't let fear paralyze you. Let it empower you.
Exactly. It's about shifting our mindset, from feeling helpless to feeling like we have some control over this situation.
Okay, I like that. But how do we actually do that? Like, how do we become more prepared? It's not like we can just, wave a magic wand and suddenly we're invincible.
Right, haha. But we can definitely take steps to improve our odds. And a big part of that is developing what we call mental preparedness. It's about like training our brains to be more resilient, more adaptable.
So it's not just about like having a self-defense weapon or knowing how to like escape from a burning building. It's about like having the right mindset.
Exactly. It's about cultivating those habits of mind that will help you stay calm, think clearly, and make good decisions under pressure.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Right.
Give me the cheat sheet to mental preparedness. How do I become a mental ninja?
All right. Well, first and foremost, it's about situational awareness. Paying attention to your surroundings, noticing those little things that might be off, like someone staring a little too long or a car that seems to be following you, those kind of things.
So it's not about being paranoid, it's about being present, like really tuned into what's going on around you.
Exactly. It's about like treating every day like a giant game of Where's Waldo, but for potential threats. Aha.
Okay, I can see how that could be helpful. But what if we do notice something that seems off? Like what's the next step?
Well, that's where trusting your gut comes in. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't dismiss those feelings, even if they seem irrational or silly.
So our intuition is like our internal security system, right?
Yeah.
It's there to protect us.
Exactly. And it's been honed over, thousands of years of evolution, so we should definitely listen to it.
Okay, I'm starting to get the picture here. Awareness, intuition, those are like our first line of defense.
Yeah.
But what about like more practical skills? Like what if something actually does happen?
Well, that's where planning and practice come in. Think about those what if scenarios, like what if someone breaks into my home? What if I get lost in the woods? What if I'm confronted by an attacker? And then like come up with a plan for what you would do in those situations.
So it's like having a fire drill for your brain, rehearsing those scenarios so that you're not caught completely off guard if they actually happen.
Exactly. And it's not just about thinking about it, it's about actually practicing those responses. Take a self-defense class, learn basic first aid, those kind of things.
So we're talking about like being physically prepared as well as mentally prepared.
Yeah.
It's like a whole body approach to safety.
Exactly. And the more you can automate those responses, the better off you'll be when the pressure's on. Because
Mhm.
when adrenaline kicks in, it's hard to think straight.
Right, right. It's like your brain goes into overdrive and you just react instinctively. So the more we can practice those responses beforehand, the better our chances of reacting in a way that keeps us safe.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical skills, it's also about building up that mental resilience, learning how to manage stress, how to stay calm under pressure, how to bounce back from setbacks.
So it's like having a strong mind as well as a strong body.
Exactly. The stronger your mental foundation, the better you'll be able to handle whatever life throws your way.
I love that. And I think a big part of that is also recognizing that we don't have to go through this alone.
Absolutely. Having a strong support system, people you can talk to, people you can rely on, that's so important.
It's like having a team of mental ninjas,
Right.
all working together to keep each other safe.
I like that. Haha. A team of mental ninjas. We should put that on a t-shirt.
All right. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from the darkest corners of human behavior to the power of mental preparedness. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
I guess my final thought would be this. Don't let fear control you. Use it as a tool to become more aware, more prepared, more resilient. The world can be a scary place, but it's also a place full of of amazing people and incredible experiences. Don't let fear stop you from living your life to the fullest.
That's a great message to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. It's been enlightening and a little terrifying, but mostly empowering, I think. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into human-made horrors. Remember, knowledge is power, and the more we understand about the dangers out there, the better equipped we are to face them. Stay safe out there, everyone. Until next time, keep those mental ninja skills sharp.